long time ago, in a ranch house far, far away, a man named George Lucas constructed the three films that were received as major disappointments by critics and fans alike. I'm talking, of course, about the Star Wars prequel trilogy. But opinions on the dialogue and amphibious Sith Lords aside, I'm not joking when I claim that the Star Wars prequel trilogy features a better told and more effective story than any piece of film out there, including the Star Wars original trilogy that everyone holds so near and dear. And while it's often hard to look past the faults of the movies themselves, it's important to recognize and appreciate the boldness and effectiveness of the story George Lucas created. And it's because of said boldness and effectiveness that the prequels make up not only my favorite Star Wars content, but also my favorite movies of all time. Aside from the captivating score and the jaw-dropping visuals, the themes of corruption and downfall rooted throughout the prequel trilogy are so intense that I can pick out new details and information with every rewatch. And while my opinion may be an unpopular one, today I will persuade you that the story portrayed in the Star Wars prequels is in fact better than that of the originals, due to the deep-rooted themes of political and moral corruption throughout the films that tie into real-world problems. So first things first, I'm going to talk about the downfall of Republic at the hands of the infamous Darth Sidious. Because the use of political corruption throughout the prequel trilogy creates a compelling narrative with real-life tie-ins. For one, Palpatine's seizure of power in the Republic. It highlights the importance of checks and balances in any well-functioning democracy, tying the story to real-world issues that we, as first-world people, can relate to. For one, as a brief recap, Palpatine orchestrates an invasion of his own planet for the Senate to hurry up and quickly impeach the current chancellor and elect him purely based off of sympathy. And after that, he was able to receive total executive authority over the other branches of government without assurance that he'll give up that power at a given time. And as my favorite YouTuber, Generation Tech, argues, as Palpatine gained power, the power of the Senate began to erode. And as time went on, Palpatine was later able to undermine the Republic's institutions completely. And with that power, Palpatine also decided to not be subject to any terms. And as Generation Tech again says, as he abolished term limits, that's an important move for any dictator transitioning a democracy into fascism. And that just shows how important it is that we, as people, ensure the checks and balances in our government stay the way they are meant to, and that no one person can overmine the power of the other branches and seize control for themselves. And furthermore, by leading the two primary factions of the Clone War, Palpatine's involvement in creating the war gives rise to the dictatorship in not only a unique way, but also in a way that it warns about the abuse of power in wartime. Because as Palpatine does, he convinces people on both sides that they are fighting for something pure and right, something like freedom or justice. Much like wars, say, in the Cold War or in the Middle East right now, where we are constantly convinced that the war is for freedom in different parts of the world, yet many believe that it's actually for other motives, such as oil or political presence or military presence. And in the case of Star Wars, as one of my favorite YouTubers, Star Wars Explained, said, autocracies aren't taken by force, they're given away and applauded, which is exactly what happened in the Republic, of course, in the Star Wars trilogy. But in contrast, the original trilogy portrays the overthrow of a dictatorship in a way that is, yes, classic, but is present in nearly every form of dystopian literature to a point where it's been overrun. For one, little is shown of the Empire's treatment toward its citizens, yet we are only told and forced to lean into the fact that the Empire is the bad guys because of a few instances of them performing some evil. And furthermore, us as a primary first world audience can't really relate to a small town group of rebels overthrowing an institution, because we're never going to be in that situation. Yet we sure as heck can be in this situation where someone in our government gains too much power and takes away our freedoms. So now that I've established the complexity of the prequel's politics and its main villain, let's discuss the downfall of the story's hero. And I'm talking, of course, about the tragic rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, which provides an original and complex main character to the heart of the story. And at the core of his story is the constant struggle between love and lost, casting a sympathetic shadow on Anakin, developing a story that's not about the rise of a villain, but about the fall of a hero. Just quick things. Anakin was born a slave. And the second that he was freed from slavery, he was taken away from his mother. And the next time he saw his mother, she died in his arms, which is something that as I, a son, a loving son with a loving mother, could not imagine what I would do if that happened to me. And furthermore, the only love he had left in his life, his wife, the one he loved and married in secret. Once he lost his mother, he was about to lose her too. And as Generation Tech said again, as he was worried about the visions he kept receiving of Padme dying, he was willing to do anything and get help from anyone to save her. And that, of course, includes Darth Sidious. Because Anakin, as he was trying to cope with the loss of his mother, couldn't afford to lose the only person that he cared about, the only person that cared about him. And so it cast the expectation of the rise of Darth Vader because of his pursuit of power to actually Anakin trying to prevent the loss of those that he loves. And furthermore, Anakin's inability to properly deal with his emotions highlights the importance of mental health in our world and turns him from a genocidal supervillain into a young man that had his back turned on by the world. For one, he's unable to seek proper therapy concerning his past loss and his fears of loss. Every time he went to the Jedi trying to seek help, they told him no. They told him just trust in the Force and let go of those who you love. And as a YouTuber Star Wars Theory elaborates on, because of that, Anakin is doing this all out of frustration and pent-up anger for everything that the Jedi did to him and held him back on and refused to help him with. And as Generation Tech says again, Anakin had to deal with all of his problems by himself. He had nobody to talk to. And unlike today in our life, where if we have mental trauma or if we are unable to cope with something, we could seek out our parents, counselors, or therapists, Anakin had nobody to turn to except, of course, the evil supervillain trying to persuade him. And unlike the prequels with such a complex character arc, the original trilogy follows more of just the established hero's journey from Greek mythology, with the tired trope of a young hero stepping into the unknown to defeat a pre-existing evil. And some places where Luke could have been more complex is he could have had a, fall to the dark side that he almost did. But aside from learning that Darth Vader was his father, he never really had any reason to turn to the dark side. A perfect reason would have been when Luke arrives home to find the bodies of his aunt and uncle along with his burnt out house, as Screen Rant says. Yet he only takes a moment of silence before moving on with his life. That's something that just doesn't really happen, and it just casts a shadow of unbelievability and unrelatability on the character of Luke Skywalker versus the tragic remorse that we as an audience feel toward Anakin. So with that all said, I'm going to wrap up my discussion. So I'd like to restate that it is my belief, and why it is my belief, that the prequel trilogy tells a much more compelling and complex story than that of the Star Wars that came before it. Because unlike the originals, which follows the standard hero's journey, the prequels tell the tale of a compelling villain using political corruption to take power, and the downfall of a sympathetic hero into the arms of darkness just because he couldn't cope with his trauma. And both of those establish clear ties to our world that we can relate to. So when you're watching any movie, not just Star Wars, it's important to judge the movie based off of the message that it's saying, and not the fans and critic reactions. And furthermore, it's important to recognize what that message means for our society.